What is up, Facebook land? Welcome to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler, and before I introduce my special guest, Miss Mistie Layne, I'm going to first dedicate the show, as I always do. And because it is Autism Awareness Month, and because I grew up with a brother who was autistic, and because I have such a soft spot for people with autism, and I work with people with autism in school, and we have people at my gym that are autistic, I want to dedicate this show to anybody that is autistic, that anybody is raising an autistic child or has an autistic sibling or friend. And just remember that they're not different. They're special. There's nothing about them that is different. God made them very unique and very gifted in many different ways, just not in the ways that maybe we are. And I think it's important that we treat people with autism with the respect that they deserve, and also the understanding and patience that sometimes is required in order to communicate and allow them to feel as if they're being accepted. The podcast can be found anywhere, everywhere. iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Anchor, you name it, you can find it there. So, Mistie, I'm going to introduce her. I'm going to give a little bit of an overview. I purposely, for the first time, chose not to do research on a lot of her story, because I wanted to be surprised, just like everybody else is, with a lot of the information. I didn't read her book. I only got as much information off her website as I needed to in order to make an introduction. So here's what I do know. I know that Mistie lives in Texas. Nod yes if I'm right on that one. I'm pretty sure you do live in Texas.
I live in Louisiana, right on the Texas border.
Louisiana.
Right on the border.
So yeah, even that I don't know about. She was in the medical world at one point in time. Some mishap happened or something happened where someone's life was taken and she found herself in jail. From that time, she's gone to create coping mechanisms, a program that allows people to overcome adversity and become their best self. And she's written a book, What Goes Up, and she is in the nuclear medicine field today.
Yes.
And that's really all I know about her, because I want this to be as authentically new and real for me as it is for you guys. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my new friend, Mistie Layne.
Hello, Matt. Thank you.
Hi.
So sorry for all the technical difficulties.
Shit happens.
It does. Thank God for Starbucks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I drove down to the Starbucks parking lot.
Well, when you have a need, you find a solution.
There you go.
And that's what we did tonight. And I appreciate, first of all, everybody hanging in there with us. Everybody staying on board.
Thank you.
Knowing that this was going to happen. And normally we do it on a different website, but we're just going to go straight Facebook Live today. And we're going to get the same result, the same interesting conversation. And she's going to share everything about her life with you guys, so you get to know her better, and me as well. So what I do, Mistie, with every show is I ask one question. I have one question only. And then every question thereafter comes from the answers that you provide.
Okay.
This is your show. This is not my show. You're here to share your story, and I'm only here to guide you if you need to be guided, and that's it. So the only question I ask is, who is Mistie Layne?
Mistie Layne, I'm a life shifter. That's my new thing. I'm a life shifter. I have lived through a lot of things that would get most people down and keep them down, and found the strength, and with God, I was able to pull myself up. I'm a very blessed person to be able to come back from what I've been through and rebuild my life, rebuild my career, and to have sustained all of that adversity and overcome it. So I've overcome my worst. I believe I'm now living my best. That's who Mistie Layne is, the survivor.
I like the end part. I think that when
Absolutely.
you got down to the nitty gritty, when you know, we're in the speaking world, we're in the helping people world, we're in the inspirational side of the world. We always want to come out with the best words that best describe us, and sometimes the best word is the most simple one, and the simplest word is your survivor.
The survivor, absolutely.
So let's talk about that. Let's just jump right in 2 feet and find out what you survived. What is it that caused you to have to rebuild? What is that story, that the rock bottom, the area where you said, I don't think it gets any worse, because you just said you're living your best now. So what was that?
My absolute rock bottom, I think for me, when I said it can't get any worse than this, is when I was laying in a bed in a prison cell facing a 40-year sentence. And every breath I took was an effort because I felt such guilt for being alive. Someone got killed in a car wreck behind my cocaine addiction, and I felt guilty for being the one that lived. And it was really tough for me to find the energy and the effort literally to take a breath every day. It was such a challenge. That was my rock bottom.
So there's so many ways I can go now with this conversation, but I'm going to ask, because as a police officer, you know, I'm known to do interviews and try to find the story and find the truth in someone's story.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're going to do today, is I'm going to try to find the truth to why you got to where you were and how you got to where you are.
Okay.
I've been saying in my life that you are where you are when you're supposed to be there.
Absolutely.
And I believe that everyone goes through loss, everybody goes through struggle, everybody goes through pain, and how they manage that. Some is worse than others. Some is not as challenging, but I believe that at the end of the day, the process of coping and healing and forgiveness is exactly the same, regardless of the severity of the issue you're overcoming.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned cocaine.
Yes.
I've been around drug addicts. I've dealt with people that were committed crimes while on drugs. I've dealt with people who died while they're on drugs. What was it? I did drugs in high school. I'm not immune to the urges and the allure of that. When you took I don't know if you were smoking it or snorting it, when you did your first taste of cocaine, why did you make that choice?
Well, I'm a little bit of an unusual case, Matt, because I didn't do my first line of cocaine until I was 30 years old, a mother of two, just gotten accepted into medical school. And it's no one's fault but mine, because I didn't respect my moment of choice at the time. But I was in an extremely vulnerable state. I was depressed. I had been in a 10-year marriage that ended pretty abruptly from adultery. I'd found out he had a woman pregnant. I had no clue any of this was going on. And my heart was broken. And I just went into a depression. I became vulnerable. I started hanging out with people. I didn't care the caliber of person I was hanging out with, as long as they were giving me the attention I felt I needed. Because once he cheated, I internalized it and thought, okay, I'm a failure. It must be my fault. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't smart enough. Wasn't pretty enough. Whatever the criteria was, I failed. So any man that came along and gave me any attention, I was all about it, and it didn't matter the caliber of person. So I found myself on the way to a Dallas Cowboys football game. On the side of the road, he pulled off, did a line of cocaine. He said, "Here." I'm like, I don't do drugs. He's like, "Just try it." And at 30 years old, I'd been hit by a drunk driver when I was 15, went through the windshield of a car, and my life was spared that day. And I'd never been about drugs. Always been the prude in high school. So it was very out of character for me. I'm not sure why I decided to do it. I just know I didn't give that choice a long enough time to respect the effect. And I did it.
And then what?
Cocaine provided a place for my brain. My brain got to stop because it was constantly going, constantly. My whole life, I've always been really hyper. And my brain, I can't shut it down sometimes. And so what the cocaine did is it took me to a place where it shut down. I wasn't having to go through all that. Not to glorify it, because there's nothing glorified about drugs. But that lasted a couple of months, and it progressed into crack cocaine. I'd never been a smoker in my life. So the first time I was presented with a pipe and said to smoke, I didn't know how. So I'm a perfectionist. So by the time I perfected the technique and could do it, I was a full-blown 100% crack addict, completely committed. It became my new best friend. It was like American Express. I didn't go anywhere, didn't do anything without it.
And what time, from the time you took your first line of coke to the time you were a full-blown crack addict, what was that time period?
A month, maybe 6 weeks. Very short amount of time.
It's amazing how powerfully addictive drugs are. And I've revived heroin addicts dozens of times. They get angry when you take them out of that. when someone's overdosing, they don't care if they're dying because they're going to a place that they love.
Right.
And when you hit them with Narcan and you bring them back, you just ruined the greatest high of their life.
Exactly.
And when you were getting high, was it more of a release from reality, or was it an escape?
It was an escape for me.
From reality.
It was an escape. It was an escape because everything I had done in a 10-year marriage that I thought I had done right and done well and worked towards for medical school, it all crashed down and ended in what I, internalized as failure. So I was trying something different. I thought, well, if that don't work, let's see what else is going on. And I just, at that point, I think I'd given up. I'm really hard on myself. I've been really hard on myself even since a little bitty kid. And that's nothing my parents did to me. That's just my nature. I've just always been a lot critical of myself. So I put a lot of pressure on myself to achieve, to overdo, to, everything. So it was an escape for me.
So during this time, you were in medical school.
I had just gotten accepted into medical school. It was in the first couple of months. Mm-hmm.
And how were you even remotely useful when you're banged up on crack cocaine or regular coke, whichever period of time you were in? How did you adapt to that?
Well, the first 6 weeks when I was doing the powdered cocaine, for me, it was a completely different type of high. I wasn't really what they call sketchy on it. But when it progressed to the crack where you're smoking it, it's completely different. It's instant. You got to have it right again, back to back. It doesn't last long, and it makes you very jittery, nervous, paranoid. When it became to that is when my life started spiraling out of control. Because I could do, at first it started out, I could do it every night. A couple of weeks later, it got to be where I needed it during lunchtime too. And I would say by the time I started smoking crack, and by the time I went from there to having to have it around the clock 24 hours was probably about 4 months, 3 or 4 months. And by then I needed it all.
Oh, we lost you. Oh, that's horrible. Let's see if we can get her back on. Oh, that's horrible. It was so good. Let me try it again. I'm sorry, guys. Bear with me. This is not ideal, but her story is so good. I do not want to miss this. Please get back on, Misty. Get back on. We need you. There we go. Let's see if she's coming back in. Yes, we got you back.
The forces are against us, I'm telling you.
Nah, this is just God saying, let's see what their fortitude's like. Yeah. That's all this is. That's all it is. So you were saying you were doing around the clock, and then that's when you knew things. Was it then that you knew that you were done? Like that, wherever you thought you could control was now no longer in control?
No, it took me a year before I was convinced that I wasn't strong enough to battle it. I would try, and the first year, I think a lot of it was me being in denial. And I hadn't let anyone know. My family knew something was definitely wrong with me, but they didn't know what. They couldn't figure it out. And then right about 10 or 11 months into it is when I told them, and they knew something, and I said, you gotta come get me and put me in rehab because I cannot stop. I've tried everything. And I've been in and out of so many rehabs. I've put myself in rehab. I've been court ordered to rehab. I've been to rehab in jail. And it works for a little while. And for me, I just never could stay. I think one time I was away 8 months and went to Walmart, and one of my old drug dealers, and this is a true literal story. This is how it works. One of my old drug dealers was behind me in the line at Walmart buying diapers, and he said, "Hey, how's it going?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm good. I'm past all that now." And he slipped me his phone number. He said, "I got a new phone." I'm like, "I don't need it." And he stuck it down in my Walmart bag as I was walking off. And I'm like, "I'm good. I don't need it." I got in the car, started driving down the road. And I mean, within 5 minutes, I was picking his number up almost subconsciously and calling him. That quick. Just that one little seed was planted, and I was there.
All right, I want to get more into the psychology of why, right? So I'm always, my background's in human behavior. My background's in understanding what makes people do what they do. And I don't want to make this feel like a therapy session, but I really think people need to hear the realities of addiction and the realities of the ramifications of choices that are made. And we need to be very clear that it starts as a choice.
Absolutely.
And it turns into an addiction that then becomes a disease. But it always starts with a choice. And, you talked about you were a prude growing up, so your own words, and that you were never smoked, you didn't do drugs, you had, from what you're saying, a great home life. When you got married, how old were you when you got married?
20. I was 20 when I got married. I had my first baby at 21, so I got married young. We were college sweethearts.
And you had your second child by the age of?
I had my second child 3 years later, so 24.
So by the time this is all going down, at 30, you had a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old.
Kindergarten and third grade, yes.
Okay. At some point in time, you lost your self-worth during that process, and I'm obviously it's when your husband decided to step out on the marriage and have an affair.
Yeah.
Where in your growth as a human being, your upbringing, did you always have that missing confidence? Did you always have the need for having someone else to validate you, or is this something that he took from you when that happened? Because there's two different ways I'm going to take this question, and after you answer it.
I didn't realize until I wrote my book and it all came pouring out of me that there was actually a problem way back. I grew up in the Texas beauty pageant system, and there was a lot of pressure. But I learned very early, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years old, I learned when I won, I got a lot of power from that. I learned very early the power that came with that, and I thrived on the power. Growing up through all the pageantry, there was a lot of pressure for the perfectionism. And I think part of me started to rebel the pressure. Because I remember my senior year of high school, I sat and pulled my eyelashes out till I had no eyelashes left at all, none. And I was a senior in high school, on top of the world, good grades, scholarship bound, I was on top of the world. But there was something missing, and I've always needed, I don't know if it's from the pageantry, but I've always needed that validation from other people, always.
Now, was your mom or your dad your like, you see today on TV, everybody's got a TV show about whatever, there's dance moms, there's pageant moms, there's all these shows that are out there. Was your mom or dad the typical pageant parents, or were they supportive of your desire to be in pageants but weren't necessarily the overbearing, the kind we see on TV these days?
I don't see them so overbearing, like to the extreme, but my mom had rheumatic fever as a child, and I do believe I think she tried to live her life a little bit through me sometimes and pushed, but I think it was out of a good place. She wanted me to have things and experience things. And I loved what I did. I was in dance. I was a baton twirler. I mean, I loved everything I did. But I think back, it was always me putting the pressure on me. Always wanted to be the best. Always wanted to outshine my brother, who was, a genius and excelled at everything. So it was me. And I don't know if I was just born that way. I don't know.
Well, now what I'm getting at is I was trying to figure out where the loss happened, where you lost your way, and what the precursors were coming up to the loss. Your husband cheating on you, and this is just my 2 cents. You can tell me to pound sand, but my thoughts is that was just the final straw.
Yes, I agree.
That wasn't the thing that caused you to go make that decision to do your first line of cocaine. It was just the final straw. And it's 99% of every person I've ever interviewed, not just as a podcast host, but as a police officer in 26 years,
mm-hmm.
There was the trigger that was the final straw. But prior to that was a pattern of, in your words, needing to be the best, being a perfectionist, needing to win, competing against others and expectations that you felt you needed to place on yourself in order to be better than them.
Yeah, I think.
And you, it was almost a purpose for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think
you're driven.
I think that perfectionism is definitely key, because anything I didn't win, I mean, I'm talking from a spelling bee to an award in the drama club. I mean, any little thing that I didn't win, it was huge to me. And I felt like it just chipped another piece of me away and made me feel less than each time. So it was like all these events of failures built up. And then, start using food to feel that. Started using Little Debbie zebra cakes, or, that's why I said there should be a warning sign on the Little Debbie box, highly addictive. Because that's what I used sugar, I used things like that to just kind of mute that feeling that I have. And I think further past, after that, my first marriage, further later into life and other relationships, men would tell me, you're so beautiful, you're so smart, but yet every man I've ever been with has cheated on me. Every single one of them. So it's like, at some point you have to start thinking, okay, well, am I smart? Am I beautiful? Are they just lying to me? Because they're all cheating on me, so I must be the problem. I'm the common denominator here. So again, more internalization on it.
I mean, I have an addictive personality. I started smoking cigarettes when I was 9 years old.
Yeah.
I chewed tobacco from the time I was 12 until I was, in my 30s. I've had a addiction issue my entire life, and it's just I replace it with things. It's just I'm just managing it enough to where it's not into the negative world. Right. But I know what my personality is like, and yeah. It's tough when you're built that way.
Yeah.
And you have to manage it, yeah. And understand that there are things that you have to accept. Like, I know that I have that, and I know there are things that I'm always gonna struggle with it, but it's something that I manage through my awareness of it and the self-awareness, knowing that it's going to be an issue forever. It's not something that I can train out of me or hypnosis or anything like
right.
that. I'm always going to have that issue. So I think it's a very real thing because I knew when you said you just started doing drugs at 30, that it wasn't just, I decided I was so sad, I just did drugs. And I went to the hardest thing on the planet at the time, right. Crack cocaine, right? It's not, you don't just jump to there. There's always a precursor to get you there.
Well, I had done everything right. I had been the girl that didn't do drugs. I was the good girl in school. I didn't sleep around or any of that. So I had done everything right, and I felt like it got me nowhere. It got me in this horrible place. So I was rebelling against all of that. I didn't want to be good anymore. I think part of me mm-hmm. wanted to be the girl across the tracks and be bad.
So let's transition now. So you're a full-blown crack addict at this time. And you're obviously making bad choices. When you're doing crack, you don't make good choices. So, I mean, it's every decision you make off of crack is just a worse choice off of the decision to smoke crack. So let's get to the point where you decided to endanger someone else's life. Well, tell that story to
I certainly didn't start my day and say I'm going to go kill someone. I can guarantee that. I had been in and out of jail, in and out of prison. Well, not in and out of jail. I had fallen into a relationship with my drug dealer, which is the craziest thing, because like you said, you're not sane when you're on drugs. And he thought same thing. You're beautiful. You're smart. You're so much fun. Let's run off and stop doing drugs together and live happily ever after. And so I was all about that. And we did. We had a lot of fun together. It was so much. It was awesome. We got off the drug when we were finally able to, moved away, did the geographical cure, moved a whole state away. And then that's when he gave me a black eye and busted my nose for the first time. Never been hit by a man, never even seen, never really been around that. I had a college friend that I rescued a couple of times, and I used to really give her a hard time because I judged her. I would say, what's wrong with you? That's not love. Just leave him. What the heck is wrong with you? And looking back now, I've had a chapter in the book, Never Say Never, because the amount of the manipulation that is used in that abusive cycle is unless you've been there, you cannot even fathom it. the way he controlled me is unfathomable. So I had found myself now in a domestic abuse relationship. I was already broken and worn. And I mean, he found every insecurity I had, and that's what he used. And so what ended up starting there was a cycle. He would have jealous rages because he was very paranoid from the cocaine. So he'd go into these jealous rages, hit me, my eye would swell up, I'd throw him out. 2 hours later, he'd show up with dope because he knew it would help the pain. I would let him in because I was in so much pain. It was a cycle, and he controlled me with it. And it was like he was pimping me to the to the crack. I mean, it was horrible. It was horrible. And what's even more horrible about that, Matt, is I would get away from him. I ran, my parents rescued me. I took off to another state, ran away from him. He came and found me, but he had changed. He had found God. He was using scripture against me. I mean, very manipulative. So I went back to him 2 different times. And it took me being physically separated from him in jail for me to break that bond. And I'm thankful for that, because I feel God has worked such a ballet in my life, because we'd gotten in some trouble. We both went to jail. My parents bonded me out. He stayed. He ended up on a hold and stayed a long time. I was back out on the streets again, but I was trying to do good. And being a police officer, you're going to appreciate this. I don't know if it's happened to you. I had gotten out of jail, slept off my high for 2 or 3 days, and I had to go meet my bail bondsman. So I was going to go drive to my house because it was in a different town than where my parents lived. My parents didn't want me to go alone, but I did it. And I walked into my house, and because they had busted us in our house and taken us from our house, they left crack cocaine and pipes and lighters sitting on the bathroom counter, left the dope sitting in my house. Well, all it took for me was to see that. And I was right there. I was right there on it. I mean, there was no premeditation. It just happened. But why they would leave that there, I don't know. But it started me on this long cycle. So I wanted to go home. I couldn't stop. I stopped a police officer. True story. In Louisiana, I stopped a police officer and I said, I need help. What's wrong with you? What do you need help with? I said, I'm a crack addict and I want to go home and I can't make it there. It's 60 miles from here and I can't get there. And he said, okay. And he followed me to the police station and he put me in a cell, but he didn't lock it. He said, I'm not going to arrest you. He's like, you're not under arrest, but I'm going to detain you. Well, because we called my dad to come get me. My dad was going to come get me. He said, but if you leave from here, I'm going to put on an APB because you've already admitted to being under the influence and driving. So he left, got on a call. He told the dispatcher, don't let her leave, whatever. So I'm sitting there and I'm needing to take another hit because, I'm coming down. It's been almost an hour. So I have always kept 2 sets of car keys. He had one, always kept an extra set. I was so manipulative. I got out of the police. I had the lady unlock the car, the dispatcher, so I could go clean up for my dad. I didn't want him to see me in the shape I was in. And she fell for it. And when I went out there to clean up and get my things out, I had the other key. I took off. Well, 2 days later from me taking off, I was in the wrong neighborhood at the wrong time. I had picked up these 2 prostitutes to give them a ride, and in turn, they could get me dope in a town where I didn't know anybody. Because that's kind of the trade-off you do. Because no one's going to sell to me. Number one, I don't look the part. Number two, nobody'd heard of me. So I was riding around with them, getting high, dropping.
We're going to get her back in. I promise. Do not go anywhere. Do not go anywhere. Do not. We're going to get her in. She's coming back. Here we go. She's coming back.
Here I am.
Here we go. You're back.
All right. So I'm riding around. They decide I'm a target, and they decided to rob me. So one had come to my window with the drugs to show me, and she punched me in the face, broke my glasses. The other one was in the car. She jumped out. I'm petrified. I'm thinking, okay, this is it. This is what everybody told me I was going to die over this drug. Here it's happening now. I flipped my car around. The only way I knew out of the neighborhood was to go back down the same street I was on. I hit the gas to go out. They threw something, which was a brick, at my car. I swerved, started sliding sideways down the road. There was we're in a neighborhood. There's a parked vehicle in the driveway. I hit the parked vehicle, which in turn, there was a lady standing in the yard. it hit her. The parked vehicle hit her and knocked her under the house and killed her. And I had no idea. I never saw her. I couldn't have stopped my car if I had. I was sliding. I woke up. My car was steaming. I turned it on. I tried to drive off. A lady ran up to the window. She said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I got to get home to my kids. I'm okay. I'm okay. I got to get home. It's the first thing I got to go home." She's like, "Honey, you can't go anywhere. Look at your car." And my car was just smoking, and I passed out. The next thing I remember, Matt, I woke up. My mom was laying like over me, sobbing over a gurney in a hospital. And I'm like, "Mom, I'm okay. I'm not hurt. Let's go get Austin, my son Austin." And I reached up to hug her and I felt that handcuff around my arm. And I'm like, "What happened? What's wrong?" She's like, "Don't you know what happened?" And the detective walked over and told my mom, "You can tell her." My mother had to tell me that I had just taken somebody's life. And it was like that gurney became quicksand. My body just felt like it was sinking in. All the air came out. It was like I had to be in another world somewhere. This couldn't be happening. And it took me 3 or 4 days to sleep off that. I'd been up for 4 days straight. So it took a while to come out of that. By the time I woke up and I was in jail, that's the place where we started the interview. I couldn't believe it. Taking a breath was literally excruciating because I felt so guilty for being alive.
Let's talk about that guilt. Because it's a weird guilt. It's all. I mean, it's surreal to think that the chain of events. Now, granted, what you did was reckless, and the actions you were taking were reckless, and being in the situation you're in was reckless, being high was reckless. But the events of being robbed and then trying to get away, and the brick going in the windshield, and you sliding and hitting a car, and that car hitting somebody else who was in a yard that you didn't notice, who then died. That has to be you. I know I would. I'd be wrestling with, did I really kill that person at fault? Is someone else at fault? Is someone else at fault? Am I at fault? Was it the people that threw the brick that caused me to go out of control? Are they at fault? There has to be I would have a conflict on whether or not that guilt is mine or someone else's. And then when I came to the realization that it was me because I started the ball rolling in that direction, I would have a hard time dealing with that. How did you manage?
Well, of course, there's culpability in it from other people, but all in all, it was my choice to be out there and it was my wrongdoing. So I knew it was me. What compounded that was that the two girls that robbed me were in the same general population as me. They didn't even segregate us. So I'm having to deal with that too. And getting death threats from her family, the lady that I killed, her family, I'm getting all kinds of, and it was hard, but I always, from the beginning, took that sole responsibility.
So once you had, let's talk about the legal process, because you talked about having a 40-year potential sentence, and you ended up with a 2.5-year prison sentence. How did it go from 40 to 2.5? What was that process like? Was that God, or was that a great lawyer?
No, that was God. What brought that about was I was there 7 months in a little tiny parish town where I didn't get any counseling. I didn't get any antidepressants. I didn't get therapy. I had nothing. It took my dad going to the sheriff's office in a wheelchair on oxygen because he was on hospice dying. It took him going down there, raising Cain, to even get me to see a doctor for the first time. This is 7 months post the accident. I've dealt with this. So I knew I was I was losing it. I could feel myself losing control of myself. So my daughter had written me a letter, and she was 18 at the time, my oldest daughter. She said, "Mom, you have to forgive yourself. You have to let it go. Write down everything that's haunting you and give it away. Let go of it." So my daughter that's now parenting me, I took her advice and I did that. It took me 3 days, and I wrote a list on legal paper, front and back, of everything. All the things I had done while I was high, all the people I hurt. I prayed on it, and I ripped it up, flushed it down the prison toilet, the jail toilet. And that provided a release for me. And when I did that, it put me in enough of a better place to where I could start writing. and I said, I'm going to write my story. And I just started writing. I didn't plan it. I didn't put an outline. I didn't premeditate a book. I went from commissary and I just started writing. And it took me months by hand, and I wrote my life story down. And that, Matt, is what saved my life. That process saved my life because it made me realize I had done a lot of horrible things, but Misty was still there. Misty still had value. I wasn't, you know, the horrible monster I made myself out to be. I wasn't all of that. I still had, I could still be saved, and it took a lot to get to that point. I had to look in the mirror every day and find one thing I could love about myself because I was so down from all the domestic abuse. He stripped me. I didn't even know what food I liked, what music I liked, because he dictated my entire life. So I had to relearn. I had to find me, and then I had to learn to love that person with all the flaws. And that whole process right there is what did it. Because that day my daughter wrote the letter to me, I looked in the mirror and I said, okay, Misty, are you going to let this kill you too? Or are you going to get up and pull yourself up? And that's what started it. It saved my life.
I was like a church. I felt like we just went to church there for a second.
It's the truth.
And I don't know if we've never spoken, she and I. We've never had a conversation. We had a Facebook interaction on Messenger. We're on the same groups and the different groups and forums that we belong to as speakers and authors. So that's how we got to know each other, but we've never spoken. And I don't know what she knows about me, and she didn't know what I knew about her. I just knew that her story was intriguing enough that I needed to share it with you guys. Everybody here that watches my show knows my story and understands very similarly how writing became my God's grace.
Yes.
And how, when my brother died, my brother was autistic and stuttered. And when he died in a car accident, I had lost, unbeknownst to me, I had lost my purpose, which was to protect him. And I had felt such guilt and anger over his death that I went into a 13-year period of depression. And it wasn't until I received a gift of a quilt made out of my brother's clothes from my grandmother she had kept because he was staying with her the week that he died. And she kept his clothes for 13 years and turned them into a quilt, that this wave of emotion just went through me. And that night I wrote 26,000 words of memories, very clear, distinct, detailed memories of my brother and just things that we had been through. And that next morning when I came up 8 hours later from writing, I saw color. I saw the sunlight, the particles of dust, the brilliance of the day just sort of opened up as if a new world had been exposed to me. And that's God's grace. And that's God saying, it's okay. Forgive yourself. You can be angry at me, but I love you and you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I loved how you told that story, because people don't understand how when you hold that in, when you hold guilt in and you hold anger in and you keep it inside of you, how destructive that is.
It's toxic.
And where you couldn't love anyone and you used drugs to hide from it, I used my desire to constantly be a hero and constantly be the protector by my military time and being a cop and going on the SWAT team and being the first in the door and all those things that I want to do, putting myself saying, God, I dare you to take me. I dare you. That I had no time to love anybody. I had no time to love my own wife. I didn't have time to love my own daughter. I couldn't provide them with that emotional connection of love. I could protect, I could provide, I could do all those things, but I couldn't love. Right. And it wasn't until I came out of that I realized the amazing emotional connection I was missing in life, not only with myself, but with everyone else in my life that knew me. Like I wasn't me for 13 years. I was a shaded version of me that was protected and blocked off. And I had this false bravado and strength that was just simply the external part, but inside I was a mess.
Yeah.
So when you had that moment of grace, when God said, it's okay, Misty, you can be angry at me, but I still love you. How long did that take before you started to truly believe that you were forgiven and that you were worthy of that forgiveness? Hang tight.
For me, Matt, it came immediately. And this is what makes my story such a complete, rounded, beautiful story. I was laying in my jail cell after I'd finished the book. I was laying in my jail cell, and the gates opened to my particular cell in the middle of the night, and a woman came in. She was crying. She was inebriated, and she was just bawling about her lover had been killed. But she had cancer, and she was glad she's not in pain anymore, but she missed her so much. And I woke up, and I gave her a t-shirt. I fixed her some coffee, commissary food and things. And I sat up with her 2 or 3 hours in the middle of the night, just talking to her. And she was drunk, so it was, kind of rambling, but I was just talking to her. The next morning, we got up and went out to general population where everyone else could see us, and everybody's pointing and whispering, and they're like, and we look at each other like, what are we supposed to fight? Who are you? And they told her, she's the lady that killed your wife. And she looked at me, she's like, she killed my wife? And I looked at her and I said, she had cancer? So what it did is it allowed her to know it was in a drug neighborhood where this happened. So the word on the street was that this was a drug deal gone bad and I killed her. Okay. So this gave her some closure. She got to know me. And what it did for me, Matt, was my personal upbringing in religion was that if you commit suicide, you don't go to heaven. That's my belief. So it gave me a shred of hope to where I said, okay, I just saved her soul. And in turn, she saved my life. And to me, that was God saying, you're forgiven, and look how beautiful it can be if you let it. And it turned it all around for me. It was such a shift at that point to see God work instantly like that. And it just, like, I'm about to just burst into tears, because how much more beautiful could it get that, yes, she died. Yes, it was horrific, but there is a silver lining. Just like they always say, God promises to take the good. There's something good. You have to be open to see it. I killed her. She was never coming back, but he gave me that to know, okay, she had cancer. She had tried to kill herself 3 times. She was in pain. So that gave me that little bit to build on, and I built on it. Yes.
That's amazing.
It's beautiful.
That's amazing.
It's beautiful.
So from that moment, when you had that moment of grace, how long was it until you got out of prison for good?
That moment of grace happened before I was actually sentenced. So what happened right after that was my district attorney, my prosecutor, came to see me, which is unheard of. You never get to talk to your prosecutor. He had gotten wind through the guards or whatever that I had written a book. So he wanted to talk to me, and he flipped through the pages, the handwritten pages. He didn't read it all. And he just sat and got to know me. He said, this isn't you, Mistie. What's happened to you? You don't belong here. And I said, I do belong here. I've killed somebody. And he said, but what happened to Mistie? What happened to you? So we talked, and he just felt like I was worth saving. He asked to have my sentence, and he went to the family, and they agreed to reduce my sentence from vehicular homicide, which carries 40 years, down to negligent homicide, which carries 5. Well, the other beautiful twist in that is that it went from a violent crime to a non-violent crime, which is how I was. So I was able to save my nuclear medicine career because I didn't get a violent crime on my record. So that is another beautiful twist. So there's 3 twists to my story. That was the second one. There's still one more to go.
Well, we're going to get to there.
Yeah.
You're now, so you get your sentence, you do your time, and you get out.
Mm-hmm.
And are you reunited with your children?
Yeah, my daughter actually is the one that came to pick me up. So I did my time at Department of Correction time in Louisiana, and I had a hold at Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I had lived before, for a probation violation. So they extradited me back there. I did an additional 7 months there. My daughter and her boyfriend drove to Albuquerque. It was an 18-hour drive, and picked me up because she said, Mom, I'm not letting you out in Albuquerque with that. You're going straight back home to Texas, where I was living. And so that period of time, there was And here's what I want to say to anybody that's listening that knows an addict, that's in a relationship with an addict, or if you are an addict or have been one. We are stuck in our place when we are in our addiction. We don't grow socially. When we go get help and get counseling and we return back to society, our families are still stuck there with us. It takes them time. You have to be so patient on both sides. It takes them time to learn that you're not a manipulator anymore, that everything out of your mouth's not a lie. It takes them time to know they can trust you again. And that you can't just expect that instantly from your family when you come home. You're all cured because you went through rehab, but they didn't. And that's so crucial because I remember coming back home after a 3 or 4 day mission, and my mom and my family would be so angry with me that it would just make me run right back out the door again because I couldn't handle it. I was already angry with myself, and now they're angry too. It's like, oh my gosh, let me just run away. So that's crucial. That a period of patience where you have to relearn, rebuild trust, and grow together.
That's important to say. I mean, I don't think people, I mean, a lot of people don't live in this world, don't live in a lot of the world that's real outside of their little network of life. And obviously in 26 years working as a cop, I've seen pretty much every bad scenario you can think of. And drugs are usually somewhere in the mix of the causation and the effect as to what happened. And it is true that it's not just an addiction that affects the addict. It has tentacles that reaches out far and wide because of all the people that have been affected by your actions, your bad choices, your lies, your manipulation, theft, things that you do to try to get people to believe you again. And that to me is it's important for people to take that side. Even in alcoholism, it happens. So it's not just a drug thing. It's any addiction whatsoever. And I would even say like things like sex addiction and gambling.
Absolutely.
The same hurt, the same manipulation, the same deceit and mistrust occurs across the board. And that healing on both sides, the person that was affected as the addict, and then the family that are affiliated with that person have to heal as well.
Right.
So assuming now you're at that point in your life where you had that healing part has started to occur, how old were you when that occurred, and how old were your kids? And where did Misty, who is sitting in front of me today in her car outside of a Starbucks because she has horrible internet service in her home, how did this person evolve from that healing?
So when I came home from jail, it was when I got out and actually came back into society was in 2010. 2010, February of the very beginning of 2010. So I was just a little over 40. I'd say I'm 51 now. My kids have always been, my two daughters, they're now 30, 27. I have an 18-year-old son at home. They'll be 19 in June. My two daughters that knew the mom before drugs, they were always supportive, angry, but supportive. They knew I was their mom. They knew that I loved them, but I'd fallen into drugs, which has been good because it has kept them away from them. And then my 18-year-old son knew me small as a kid, but then, I was in jail during, his first, second, third grade year. So he lived with my mom at that time. So I came back into his life in the middle of his fourth grade year. So it was tough. It took some time to rebuild all of that. But the person I became today is because I'm a survivor. I'm a survivor. I realized through my writing that I had worth, and I worked really hard to rebuild my life. I did the time it took to regain the trust in the medical industry again, to be trustworthy and accountable for everything and dependable. That was a big thing, to be dependable again. So I just let that process happen. And then last April, I was at a conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Dr. Duck Vong, and he's heard about my book and he said, "You haven't published it?" I said, "No, I wrote it, 11 years ago. And no, I'm waiting on my son to get out of school because I don't want anything to come down on him. Kids can be mean if they hear I was a drug addict. He's like, you know how many people you could be helping? And I'd never really thought of it again. I thought of it when I wrote it to help people, but after that, I was trying to help me regain. I just hadn't thought of it that way. So I decided to come out with, I talked to my kids and they're all like, go for it, Mom. Don't wait till Austin's like, don't wait till I'm out of school, Mom. Help people now. So I decided that's it. We're going for it. I had to rewrite the book because it was written very dark and the tone of it was not who I am today. It was what I call a toxic dump. It was a toxic dump and it was necessary, but it wasn't the book to publish today. So I went back and revisited it and I had to rewrite it, change the tone, because then it was all about blaming people. Today it's about taking accountability and forgiveness. So I redid the tone of the book, and it was a process. And it was hard to relive that process, especially the domestic abuse part. But that too was therapy that I feel God knew I needed. I needed it. So coming through all of that now, today where I am is I feel like this. God has spared my life twice now in 2 wrecks. He has me on a purpose. He has me on a mission. God's never given up on me, and I'm not going to give up on God. So now I'm all in now. I'm all in. I'm going to do what it takes. And people say, how can you be so honest? I mean, because there's things we haven't even touched on here, like abortion, being too high on crack to put the crack pipe down long enough to make it to my appointment to have my abortion. I literally couldn't get there because I couldn't put the pipe down. I mean, people say, how can you tell people all the stuff about you? I said, because if it's going to save somebody's life, it's worth it. I've already lived through it. I've done it. People ask me all the time, you minimize it, Misty. Don't you realize? No, because to me, I'm through with it. I've been there, done that, I'm done. But to the person hearing it for the first time, they're like, so it's like, if that can save their life or affect them in any way, then it's worth it. I'll be transparent. I'll take the blows because I'm tough. It's going to take a lot to get this kid down. I've been through a lot, so I'm in it.
So you're now a speaker. You're now out there helping people overcome adversity, whether it's addiction or any other adversity that's in their life. You wrote this book, What Goes Up.
Yes.
I'm going to get you're going to send me a copy and I'm going to read it.
Yes, I am.
And I'm going to send you a copy of mine and you will read mine.
I'm going to give you a copy.
We do for each other.
I'm going to give you a copy at the event next weekend.
Awesome. The mission, the purpose that you're on is from the heart, which I think is, there's a lot of, and I don't know how long you've been immersing yourself into the speaker's world, but there are a lot of people that aren't from the heart in this industry. There's a lot of people that don't have the ability to vulnerably share and own their story and relive it in a way that takes the person who's listening to the moment when it was happening to you and relive it again at that moment. And I think that's a special thing that someone can do. And you took me, at least. I was envisioning your jail cell. I was envisioning the scene of the accident when it happened. I was envisioning the 2 hookers in your car. And in my mind, I said, she's going to get rolled. That's exactly what I thought when you were telling the story.
Yep.
And that's a gift.
Thank you.
And what I will tell you is this. I've interviewed a lot of people. I know a lot of people that are mutual people that we know, quote unquote, on Facebook. And some of them I'm sure are fantastic human beings. Some of them I think are full of shit.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality. But they're going to make money and they're going to do their thing. And I don't begrudge anybody. But there's a special kind of person that can live their life again and again and again and again and again in front of an audience every single time, and go back and relive it as if it was happening at that moment in front of them. And that's the gift. I don't care what anybody says. Everyone else go pound sand. I don't care if you're Tony Robbins or Grant Cardone. You can get up and be the most energetic, rah-rah, shish-boom-bah guy there is. I could give a shit about what you're saying. Yeah. What I want to hear is somebody tell me something that means something. Touch my soul. Make me go, I am a better person after hearing that story and understanding what that person went through and appreciate what they are now. And you have that gift. So whatever it happens to you in the future, whatever your role is in life, never stop telling that story. Never stop being the person that can go back to that moment and live it again. It's important. You have to relive it every single time you tell that story. I cry every time I go on stage. And people tell me, why after 30 years, why after 30 years do you still cry just as powerfully hard today as you did the day that your brother died? It's because I'm living it when I'm telling you I am feeling that same exact sadness again. And I don't ever want to not feel that.
It's authentic.
And I don't want to not feel it. I want that to be there every day of my life. I want to be able to go back to that moment and the good moments, the happy moments, I want to be able to live, because for 13 years I didn't feel shit.
Right.
I was blocked off from all of it. And you were coke induced for years. You didn't feel anything.
10 years.
And now you're not. And now you can feel. And your heart can be open. You can go and feel pain and sadness and happiness and joy and all those things without the worry of being clouded by drugs. And I think that's the gift, is that, you know, I have friends that are in the program for AA, NA, Gamblers Anonymous. It's important that you continue to live your honest life and be truthful with who you are and where you've been.
Right.
And when you have a chance to share that story, do so authentically and honestly.
Well, that what you said right there brings me to this. I did not let go of that book for a long time in fear of judgment. Remember, I'm the people pleaser. I'm the one that needs validation from everyone. I was so scared that the doctors that I was working for had rebuilt my life around again. The Scoutmaster, where my son had just made his Eagle Scout. I didn't want those people to know that, Misty. I was ashamed, and I was too afraid of that judgment. And then it all came through me. Like Lauren Harris, he's my coach. He tells me it comes through you, Misty. It's not something you're doing. It's coming through you. And when I realized that and listened to it, then I say this mission is unstoppable. It's unstoppable because I'm not in control. It's going to happen. And God is the one that allows me to revisit those times. 5 years ago, I probably couldn't have done it because I wasn't ready. But today, it's my time, and I'm ready, and it's not even about me. I tell people, when I've spoken before, I think it was at a Habitude Warrior conference in Houston with Eric Swanson, and I said, you know what? Everything I went through and every horrible thing I drug my kids through, it made them strong, independent, and resilient kids, and they're tough. And that's the third twist I want to mention real quick. It's a super, super, super power. I got married to my husband on September the 18th. It ended in a divorce that left me heartbroken. The wreck happened on September 18th. Okay, 2 dates now, September 18th. I'm home from prison, rebuilding my life. My oldest daughter calls me and said, Mom, I'm pregnant. It's my first grandbaby due. She's due on September 18th. I'm thinking, God is good. He is replacing a life with a life that I felt like I stole. So my daughter goes into labor. She actually has her on September 18th. Her oxygen was cut off. My grandbaby Eliana was born completely blue. She is blind and deaf. She does not suck or cry. She's never heard her mom's voice. They've never seen her and looked her in her eyes because she's blind. She can't control her temperature. She is got severe brain damage. But my daughter is a freaking superhero. She is the strongest woman I know in my life. And I'm not saying I did that, but those circumstances damn sure got her prepared for that. It did. And so the first couple of months of Eliana's life, I loved her and I held her and I nurtured her, but there was a disconnect. And then it dawned on me one day what was happening. The devil convinced me that this was my fault. Matt, I thought this was my judgment. I thought I did this. And so I was letting my past rob me of my joy. And I realized no more. It's full speed ahead now. People have to hear this. People can no longer be held bondage by this toxicity that they're harboring. They have to get this crap out of them because it changed my life. And I feel like if it shifted my life, then I want to help somebody else shift theirs too, because I'm a much different place now. You know, and why else do we go through those things if it's not to share back and help? Think about you use those experiences to learn and grow as a community. It so happens the world's a 7 billion person community. It's hard to control it, but each story matters. Your story matters.
And I think that's a great way to end the show. I think while this was not our ideal podcast environment, we didn't start off without a hitch, but I believe that what you shared is going to impact lives. I think that the audience, we kept a very strong audience throughout. This is going to be a very well-received show. And I think you are special. You have a gift, and it's not a gift of, it's not a gift that requires a crown or a sash or a trophy. You have a gift because you have suffered and overcome, and some of it was at your own doing and some of it was not, but either way you came out of it and you have a story to tell that's going to impact people. And there's more people like Mistie than people want to acknowledge. There are people that are going through what you went through under their own terms, and I just think it's important that your story is heard and shared on the stages all across the country, and that whatever platform you have, grasp it, own it, make it yours, and dominate the stage, because you have an ability to share in a way that will make somebody stop thinking about their own shit and think about the greatness of what life can be if they just let it go.
Absolutely. When at the Empowering Athletes event, where you and I are both going to be speaking next weekend, that's what I want to talk to those kids about, is to educate them that they need to respect that moment of choice, because it's going to affect their lifetime of decisions and the people around them. If I'd have given that one day I did that line of cocaine, if I'd have given that a little bit more thought and said no, none of that would have happened. But because it did, I found the blessings in it, and we're capitalizing on that, which is what I'm going to encourage those kids to do. If you mess up, it's okay.
Amen.
Just find the blessing in it and use it.
Outstanding. Well, thank you so
Thank
much
you,
for going out of your way to find cell service that will hold up. Thank you, everybody, for being patient. And if you didn't get to watch the whole episode, please go back and do so. Once again, I am Matt Cubbler. You've been watching another episode of the 2 Dates and a Dash podcast. My special guest was the amazing Mistie Layne. And everybody, please go out, live your very best life, live it with intention and purpose, and with passion. Live a life that when your life is over, the podcast is 2 Dates and a Dash. You're born in one day and you die on the other, and the dash is what you make of it. And your life is not meant for you, it's meant for others. It's meant for when you die, that others will have learned and through your life and through your living. So go out and live a life that is worthy of being remembered. And I think everybody that pays attention to this show ultimately wants that in their life anyways. So God bless, and be kind to one another.
Thank you. And I look forward to meeting you next weekend.
I'm going to send you I'm going to FaceTime you in a second. So don't go anywhere. Okay. All right.
Bye.
See you guys. Take care.